Let's go now to the growing alarm over the future of public education here in the U.S. after President Trump signed an executive order Thursday to dismantle the Department of Education, calling it the first step toward eliminating the department completely. Joining us now is former U.S. Secretary of Education and managing partner at Emerson Collective, Arne Duncan. Arne, good to have you back on the show, particularly during this time, because Trump said his order will return education back to the states. States already pay for about 90% of K through 12 education. They make the vast majority of decisions about how schools are run. Trump's main rationale was that his claim that student performance has not improved in decades, but he didn't say how closing the department is going to help improve outcomes. Let's together listen to what some department officials said after the cuts were first announced.
I think there's such a fundamental misunderstanding of what the agency does. Like, we don't do curriculum. We're not allowed legally to do curriculum.
We don't tell teachers how to teach. We don't, write curriculum. We don't, go in and tell schools, like, this is what you have to do.
Give me a sense what this is going to mean in a practical way for classrooms across the U.S.
So a couple of things, and you captured it perfectly. First of all, an executive order is simply performative. It's performance art. It has no legal standing. The Department of Education was created by Congress. It would take an act of Congress to eliminate it, so it's never going to happen. Secondly, as you said, the vast majority of resources already come at the state level and local level, about 90%. So if you want to, quote unquote, return education to the states, congratulations, mission accomplished. That's already happened. Third, what we do have is a reading crisis in our country. Our NAEP scores were far too low, and nothing Trump has said, nothing Trump has done, nothing he has talked about or threatened helps a single child learn how to read in America. And that's the tremendous travesty in all of this.
So, Arne, for years, calling for the elimination of the department, it was something of a litmus test, right, for Republicans. Trump signed this executive order in a big ceremony. He was surrounded by Republican lawmakers and conservative organizations, the polar opposite of DOJ's secretive government slashing efforts. What is Trump and conservatives' vision for the federal government's role in public education?
Well, he has no vision. I mean, the vision is to destroy, to dismantle public education. And I'll give you a little bit of a counterpoint, because I always think education should be the ultimate bipartisan or nonpartisan issue. Let me just tell you what some other Republican presidents have done, starting with our nation's first Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, who created land-grant universities, absolutely transformative during the Civil War. Fast forward to the last 70 years, President Eisenhower created the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, putting the federal footprint on education. President Nixon, lots of challenges with what he did in other ways, but he signed into law Pell Grants that have been transformative. President Ford, IDA, the Individuals with Disabilities Act, creating opportunities for children with special needs to have a free and fair education. So it's really important for your viewers to understand this is not left versus right, D versus R. This is unprecedented in the history of our nation to have a president attack and try and dismantle public education in America. And increasingly, he's going to attack higher education.
I really appreciate that perspective, again, relative to the Republican presidents and what they have done. Thank you for that. The White House said that the $1.5 trillion in federal student loans now will be overseen by the Small Business Administration. NPR reported in an emergency meeting, Education Department officials said it would now struggle to perform even basic functions when it comes to administering loans. Are you confident, Arne, that loan services won't be disrupted when they're handled by a department with no education expertise?
Well, it's such an important question. So when I led the department for 7 years, my biggest worry every day was around federal student aid, FSA, and making sure we were taking care of those hundreds of billions, trillions of dollars, and millions of students well on the higher education side with grants and loans. When they basically dismantle FSA, lay off half the employees, and then say they're going to move it to another agency, the amount of operational risk they are taking on is terrifying. And if they asked me to serve as Secretary of Education, I could not do it in good conscience now because I would have no confidence we could execute against it. And I desperately, desperately hope this doesn't happen. But as we go into the fall, if there is some catastrophic failure around funding for higher education, they're going to own it. There's a saying when you walk in some stores, if you break it, you own it. They have broken the Department of Education. They've dismantled FSA. And if we have a massive failure this fall, the Trump administration is going to own it.
Arnie, you said nothing Trump is doing is going to help kids learn to read. What will?
A couple things. And again, education should be the ultimate bipartisan, nonpartisan issue. We should all be working on this. Two things that we absolutely know work. And let me be clear. We had tens of millions of children who were too far behind prior to the pandemic. And during COVID, the kids that were the furthest behind fell even further behind. We as a nation can't afford to have a lost generation of students. So we should all be trying to work together to help them catch up as fast as possible. What works? Two things. One, high dosage tutoring. And when students have access to high quality, high dosage tutoring, they accelerate their learning at very significant rates. And we've seen that happen in some districts and states across the country. The second thing is just common sense for all of us is more time. When any of us struggle with anything, we need to spend more time. So whether it's more time after school, whether it's Saturdays, whether it's summers, students need more time to learn. Those two things, if we took those to scale, could help this generation succeed and give them a chance in life. If we don't, the devastation we do to them, to their families, to our economy, and ultimately to our democracy really gives me great pause, really concerns me.
Arnie Duncan, thank you so much for your time as our Secretary of Education, and thank you for our conversation. We'll see you again.